Today, we're diving deep into the topic that straddles the line between reality and the unknown. The real paranormal programs conducted by the CIA, the Pentagon, and the U.S. government. They've long been speculated on. As to what extent and how deep has the government's involvement into the unknown went? What have our leaders found in the darkness that causes them to hide these programs from their own people that they're sworn to protect? Perhaps they understand that to lead the masses, it's better to keep them happy and blind, just faithful citizens reproducing and keeping the economy afloat, while supernatural forces surround us every day. Their intentions unknown to all except the ones behind the curtain, the so-called leaders of our world, are government agencies charged with protecting our best interest. But are they? Why is it we only find out about these programs after the fact? Why do we only usually hear of the failures, but no mention of the success achieved through this research? Paid for by we the people. Tonight's episode takes us to the dark hallways of the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, all the way to the White House as we search for the truth behind the real Paranormal Academy in the USA. This is your Shadow Nation.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
Stop this. A UFO.
Most people think of the paranormal as a realm of ghosts, cryptids, and extraterrestrial beings. But what if I told you that the military has been investigating these phenomena for decades? Today we'll explore some of the most notorious projects, the mysterious results they've uncovered, and the conspiracy theories surrounding what the government might still be hiding from us. What if I told you that the Department of Defense and the CIA spent 4 decades researching extrasensory perception and psychokinesis, i.e. bending spoons with your mind? You guys have heard of this. From the 1950s to the 1990s, the military and intelligence communities investigated psychic phenomena, conducted missions that relied on subjects believed to have supernatural powers, and competed with the Soviet Union in a psychic arms race. In the book Phenomena, The Secret History of the U.S. Government's Investigations into Extrasensory Perception and Psychokinesis, published in March, investigative journalist Annie Jacobson explores the bizarre world of the government-funded research into the paranormal. The responsibility of the Defense Department and CIA is to be aware of what the enemy is working on and to create programs to counter it. Is this the chicken and the egg scenario, Jacobson says? Is this the military-industrial complex? Let's see. How did this all start? And how was it allowed to get as far as it did? Here are 5 crazy but true stories about the government's research into the psychic phenomena. Number 1, it all started with the Nazis, some of whom were obsessed with black magic. In 1945, the Nazi regime defeated members of an elite U.S. scientific intelligence initiative called Operation Alsos, who had made their way to Berlin to scoop up as much intel as possible on German military projects. In the bombed-out remnants of a villa in an affluent neighborhood in the southwestern Berlin, they uncovered a cache of documents and artifacts that were part of Heinrich Himmler's science organization, which was well-funded and vast. It even had an entire branch devoted to the survey of the so-called occult sciences. The high-ranking Nazi leader was obsessed with the occult. On Himmler's orders, the SS officers raided Germany's occupied territories for artifacts related to magic, even ransacking museums in Poland, Ukraine, and the Crimea for mystical text. Nazi scientists at Annerby scoured the globe for items like the Holy Grail and the Lance of Destiny, the spear thought to have killed Christ. In that organization, there was ESP, psychokinesis, map dowsing, and an element of what you could say was the supernatural or the paranormal. In the villa's basement, the researchers found remnants of the Teutonic symbols and rites, as well as a baby's skull in a corner pit of ashes. We later learned that the Soviets had captured an equal probe of information on this same subject, and when we learned that they were working in this area, you could say that this is the origin story of the psychic arms race. The Cold War arms race spilled over into psychic research. The United States' foray into the psychic research took off in the 1950s when it set about countering Soviet mind control, thought to be legitimate concern at the time, and it was based at least partially off of Nazi research uncovered at Anarby. Both the US and the Soviet Union relied on the caches of Nazi research they recovered, some of which detailed experiments conducted at concentration camps. Nazi scientists pushed human psychology to extremes and monitored the results. Now, the CIA and the KGB would conduct similar experiments, each side arguing that the other side's program required countermeasures to defend against them. This fear of Soviet mind control was reinforced by videos of American prisoners of war reciting communist propaganda. Decorated World War II hero Nanel Kaledina was the Soviet Union's most famous psychic, rumored to have the ability to stop animals' beating heart using only psychokinesis, which is the ability to alter matter with the mind. We look back and say now that that's ridiculous. You can't brainwash someone, but it certainly looked that way when you watch those old black and white images of those POWs. Jacobson explains, adding that government's exploration into psychic phenomena began as part of MK Ultra. The CIA-backed mind control program, MK Ultra, officially started in 1953, ran well into the 1960s, and involved dosing American citizens with biological and chemical agents like LSD or acid, often without the individual's knowledge. While they were looking into the mind research and how to input behavior, the MK Ultra Subproject 58 became significant, which is the program to use drugs, which they call psychopharmacology, to enhance psychic functioning in psychic people. It was real. It was a real jumping off point for understanding how and why this race against the Soviets began and why it's legitimate in many ways. Both the Soviet Union and the US government pointed to each other's research into mind control, counter mind control, and psychic phenomena in general as justification for the research. There were stories of Americans putting telepaths on nuclear submarines, of Soviet mind control rays, and a Russian psychic so powerful she could stop the heart of a frog with only her mind. With each new rumor, some based on actual experiments, others little more than disinformation campaigns, the psychic arms race picked up speed. The government's research into psychic phenomena often jumped back and forth between the DoD or the CIA, with the program being shut down after inconclusive results, only to open up under a new name. In the 1970s, the remote viewing program was owned by the Defense Department. Remote viewing is essentially the idea that someone can visualize details of distant people and objects through telekinesis. A remote viewing operations building was located on the Fort George Meade Army facility in Fort Meade, Maryland. A small operation was run out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Its chief employed a secretary, Rosemary Smith, who believed she had psychic powers. It was a very small budgeted program because most people thought it was bananas. That changed in the times of emergency, like in 1976 when the remote viewing team was given a whopper of a mission. A Soviet bomber had gone down in the jungles of Africa, and the CIA military intelligence had used every intelligence collection means available to them, from satellite technology to SIG intel to human intelligence, and they had absolutely nothing. The military contacted the remote viewing operation at Patterson, and they put the secretary, Rosemary Smith, on the job. And she was able to draw maps that pinpointed where this aircraft was within a few miles. The cable was sent to the CIA, and they sent a paramilitary team out to the jungle and near the area where Rosemary Smith said it would be. They saw a villager carrying a piece of aircraft out of the jungle, and that would lead the team exactly to the downed bomber. It was an earth-shattering event. A psychic was able to produce actionable intelligence that no one else could. Then there were the men who stared at goats, amongst other things. One Army unit detailed in Jacobson's book, Phenomena, known as Detachment G, was established by top ranking officers who were leery about the idea of bringing on psychics for research purposes. So they stocked the program from within the Army's ranks. One of the unit's taskings was remote viewing. And in September of 1979, the National Security Council called on Detachment G to use their remote viewing powers to investigate a Soviet naval base. While concentrating on a photo in a closed envelope, one of the unit's members described seeing a building on a shoreline, which smelled of gas and industrial products. Inside the building was a large coffin-like object, a weapon with fins like a shark. A few months later, the CIA received satellite imagery showing that the Soviets had constructed a new ballistic missile submarine, later made famous by its NATO designation, the Typhoon class. The hulking nuclear sub was known in the USSR as the Akula, or as Russians would say, the shark. If this sounds like the basis of The Men Who Stare at Goats, that's because it is. And guess what? We still haven't given up on this research. Presently, the Office of Naval Research calls this program anomalous mental cognition, referring to a $3.9 million program founded by the ONR in 2014 to investigate the existence of precognition, which they refer to as spidey senses. Yes, just like in the comic books. In 2006, Army Staff Sergeant Martin Richburg sensed something odd about a man at a cafe in Iraq. After clearing out the patrons, he discovered an improvised explosive device that the man had left behind. Now, whether it was instinct or something more, researchers are understandably curious to see if there's a way to trigger that kind of sense. Non-invasive electrophysiography based brain-computer interface enables direct brain-computer communication for training. Does all these programs and tests and approaches to warfare sound far-fetched? You think your government would never use these approaches or techniques? Well, how about the time the U.S. government used vampire massacre as a way to stop conflict? That's right. Edward G. Lansdale was an Air Force officer who worked with the CIA's precursor, the Office of Strategic Services, during the World War II. He had served in the Philippines, and with the Hawks insurgency on the rise, he was called back to help fight it. He and the CIA started to develop a plan, not just to fight the Hucks, but to sway Filipinos from joining them. The solution Lansdale came up with was vampires. Well, technically, an answang. In the Philippines, an answang is kind of a catch-all term for various monsters in folklore, such as werewolves and vampires. But for Lansdale, it was clearly the vampiric take on aswang that was the plan. The psychological warfare squad was brought in. The squad went around to villages spreading rumors that a aswang was in the countryside, actually where the Hucks were based. Then they started hunting the Hucks. The squad would kidnap and end a person of a Huck patrol. Then they killed the person by puncturing the neck, hanging the corpses upside down, and letting the blood drain. The Hucks would come back and think an aswang had got their comrades, and so would the villagers. This was paired with other attempts to bring supernatural horror to warfare. Lansdale had a psyop squad paint the eye of a god on buildings during the night, targeting people assumed to be allied with aiding the Hucks. And somehow, against all odds, the plan to fake a vampire attack using corpses of kidnapped Filipino rebels sort of worked. Over several months, from 1952 to 54, the Hucks lost ground and the rebellion was put down. Lansdale, meanwhile, continued his work there, before CIA Director Alan Dulles had him take his anti-communist counterinsurgency plans to Vietnam in 1954. Now, that's just one example of many of what governments are willing to try when dealing with adversaries or trying to persuade the masses to go along with the plan. You have to ask yourself, why would the government try an idea like vampire attacks to gain an upper hand? Could it be that the good people of the region were simply superstitious? Or did the leaders in that area understand that vampire monsters was a very real threat that had been used in past conflicts? To understand government's involvement with the paranormal, we have to look back at some of the key programs that have come to light. One of the earliest and most infamous was the Stargate Project, which began in the 1970s. This program aimed to investigate the potential of psychic phenomena, particularly remote viewing, the ability to perceive or describe details about a distant or unseen target. The Stargate Project was later declassified in the 1990s, revealing that the CIA had trained individuals to use their psychic abilities for military intelligence. What's fascinating about that is that some reports indicated successful outcomes. Agents were able to describe locations and even identify objects without any prior knowledge. But were these results genuine or just coincidence? Another project used was called MK Ultra, a program that sought to explore mind control and human behavior manipulation. While it primarily focused on drugs and psychological techniques, many believe it also ventured into the realm of the paranormal. Some conspiracy theorists argue that the CIA was experimenting with ways to enhance psychic abilities or use them as a form of mind control. Could it be that the government was not just interested in controlling the mind, but also in tapping into the unexplained? Documents have surfaced that hint at experiments involving hypnosis and altered states of consciousness, which some believe could be linked to paranormal experiences. Now, let's move on to the Pentagon. In recent years, we've seen a surge in interest surrounding the unidentified aerial phenomena, the government's term now for what many call UFOs. In 2020, the Pentagon officially released videos captured by military pilots showing unidentified objects performing maneuvers that defy our current understanding of physics. What does this mean? Could it be that the military has been aware of extraterrestrial life all along? Some insiders claim that the government has made contact with otherworldly beings and has been reverse engineering their technology for years. The implications are staggering. And then there's the cover-ups. The cover-up conspiracies, at least. Many believe that the government has used these paranormal programs to distract the public from more pressing issues or to conduct secret operations under the guise of scientific research. The secrecy surrounding these projects only fuels speculation. What about the reports of military personnel encountering ghostly apparitions in war zones, or the strange phenomena witnessed during training exercises? These incidents often go unreported or are dismissed as mere hallucinations, but could they be linked to something more? It's crucial to consider the importance of oversight in these programs. With the CIA and the Department of Defense involved, questions arise about ethical boundaries and the potential for abuse of power. As citizens, we must remain vigilant and demand transparency regarding government activities, especially those that touch on the unknown. So what's the truth? Are we dealing with genuine paranormal phenomena, or are all these just clever illusions crafted by the military minds? The reality may be stranger than fiction. And as we peel back the layers, we find ourselves confronting the very nature of reality itself. Regardless of how intelligent we think ourselves to be, with our unwillingness to believe in the paranormal, the fact remains our governments around the world have spent billions on these studies and programs. And even though we hear nothing today of these projects, rest assured, they still exist. And our tax dollars are going to pay for every second of them. What do our leadership know that we don't? Why is it so hard to believe in things we can't see or touch? At the very foundation of our human knowledge of the known and unknown, we must accept the fact that the same people telling us these things don't exist are the same ones spending our money to study them. Hey guys, thanks for joining me on another episode of your Shadow Nation podcast. If you like this one, please go on over to YouTube and search up Shadow Nation podcast and I'll be there. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps, guys. Be sure to follow on all social media platforms so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Also, check out the website, shadownation.com, for over 17 years of mind-blowing paranormal content. And if you have any show ideas for the upcoming episodes, go ahead and shoot me an email at Sean, S-H-A-U-N, at shadownation.com. I'd love to hear from you. From the haunted back roads of America, this has been another episode of your Shadow Nation podcast. Don't go changing America, because you know I won't, because I love you. Good night, everybody.